Consider the possibilities. What if? Consider the possibilities. Marcy Field.
What if? What if, instead of repeating history, we learned from it? What if, instead of learning from history, we learned from her story? How many of you are familiar with the Persons case? Do any of you know of the famous five? Alberta's famous five? Yes. Mr. Toastmaster, Madam Chairperson, fellow Toastmasters and honored guests, today I'm going to share with you a Made in Alberta story. It's one that fills my heart with pride every time I think of it, especially going into International Women's Day on March 8th. In 1916, there was a trial set for a group of prostitutes. And Emily Murphy, an activist for women's rights, was denied access because it wasn't appropriate for a mixed audience. Emily was not pleased with that news. So she went to Alberta's General, the Auditor General, and asked that a court be set up for women to be tried and that a female magistrate be put in place for that. Alberta's Attorney General put her in place, appointed Emily to become that magistrate. She became the first police magistrate in Edmonton, in Alberta, in Canada, and in the British Empire. Her first day in court, a lawyer stood up and said, "You cannot officiate here because under the British North America Act, you're not a person." Imagine. He was overruled. And many times after that, it was overruled until in 1917, Alberta Supreme Court decided that women were in fact persons in Alberta. Moving forward, in 1920, Emily Murphy decided she wanted to apply to campaign to get a seat in the Senate. As she got there, once again she ran into that same resistance because Canada was governed under the British North American Act, and she was unable to be accepted because the British North America Act under Section 24 said that only the correct persons could take this role as a senator. Now, this was based on historical precedent. When the British North American Act had been put together, what they had meant by persons was men. So it would remain men that could do this. Emily was not one to stand by and accept the status quo. She learned that there was a clause in the Supreme Court of Canada Act that said any group of 5 people acting as a unit could appeal to the Supreme Court to review any section of the Constitution, in this case the BNA Act. In August 1927, Emily got together 4 of the brightest minds, active female activists, and invited them to her house. They sat on her veranda and they took a pen to paper and wrote a letter to the Supreme Court that said, will you consider the possibility of a woman being made a senator? This possibility. This quickly became known as the Persons case. The Supreme Court reviewed it in March 1928. Their decision was that, no, women are not persons. But these women were not to be stopped. They knew that there was one authority higher than Canada's Supreme Court. So they wrote their petition and took it to the Privy Council of England, who at that time overruled. So across the pond they went. There, the Privy Court reviewed it almost 19 months later. At that time, Lord Sankey, who sat on the Privy Council, in October 18, 1929, he stepped forward into this crowded room and he said, we have decided women are persons. Further, he declared that this ruling is from a much more barbarous time than ours. This led to reverberations throughout the Commonwealth, the British Empire at that time, because no longer could prejudices be held against women in this role, restraining them from taking their place legally as persons. 5 Alberta women making a difference. Emily Murphy leaves us with this stat. Never has a country been more prepared to provide a great race of women, and never has a race of women been prepared to provide a great country. Mr. Toastmaster.